She was kidnapped by her husband and in-laws.
Mira lo que le hacen a mi hijita.
No, es una locura, es una mentira, puede ser, no sé, es que ahí está coludida la vecina le ha estado instigando, diciéndole deja ese tipo.
Viera Rivera was beaten and attacked by them in Peru, and like in a horror film, she had to throw papers out of the window to ask for help. The Chilean woman went through a horrendous ordeal at the hands of her in-laws after living locked up for 4 years in a flat. Viera not only had to survive serious violations, she also gave birth to her daughter and survived a miscarriage in conditions of captivity. She survived almost 4 years of torture in the home of her in-laws, where she suffered physical, psychological, and economic violence, a shocking case of gender violence that sadly unites Peru and Chile. Viera Rivera Salazar moved with her husband and in-laws to the city of Chiclayo in northeastern Peru, not knowing that a true story of terror would begin there. He called me worthless, useless, a moron, an eyesore. As if this wasn't enough, Viera was kept absolutely isolated from the outside world. She had no mobile phone of her own and no acquaintances in the city of Chiclayo. The woman was permanently locked in a room in the small flat, where they even fed her by leaving her food at the door. The hell that the Chilean woman had to go through also involved receiving blows and abhorrent insults from her father-in-law. I never responded to my father-in-law or my husband because I was afraid of them, that he would attack me because he physically assaulted me twice. The first aggression was on February 13th, 2020, when I was with my daughter in my room. My in-laws arrived, and at that moment I was with the tablet. I was talking to my sister Fatima through the messenger application. I was asking her for help to be able to return to my country of origin, and my father-in-law said to me, "Now I've caught you, motherfucker." And they took the tablet from me, and then I took refuge in my room. That's when my in-laws arrived, and my father-in-law Giorgio Armas punched me in the head, pulled me by the arms, and took advantage of the situation to take my daughter away from me. But the horror wouldn't stop there for Viera. The woman gave birth to her daughter Paris in these conditions, and it was precisely her little daughter who was her greatest motivation to escape from confinement. Viera resorted to desperate means to regain her freedom. She wrote in code to her family, asked neighbors for help, and threw papers out of her window, begging to be saved. Although communication with her family was brief and always monitored, in Chile, they knew something was wrong.
Muchas veces él le pasaba el teléfono para que se pudiera comunicar conmigo, porque le quitaron el teléfono, todo, ella no podía comunicarse directamente con nosotros.
The Peruvian Public Prosecutor's Office already had complaints about the situation, but it was a complication in Viera's health that triggered the police operation that saved her life, and one of her neighbors was instrumental in her release.
El temor de ella era, te vas tú, pero me dejas a la niña.
Viera was not living a love story as her family thought. Giorgio Armas, a Peruvian citizen, came into Viera's life through Facebook. After a brief courtship, the couple decided to get married in Chile. The ceremony took place in Triguén, where Viera is from, and just a few days later, the two left to build their lives in Chiclayo, Peru, where Giorgio is known for hosting shows and teaching martial arts classes. However, the story quickly took an unsettling turn when her husband and his parents began to mistreat her. It happened once when my father-in-law Giorgio Armas attacked me in the head because I looked at him badly for shouting at my daughter Paris because she was crying. The motives for the mistreatment of Viera have shocked Chileans and Peruvians alike. The situation Viera was going through was no secret in her neighborhood. Although many of the neighbors didn't even know the woman, the few interactions she had with some of her neighbors gave away that she wasn't well. In the forced confinement to which she was subjected, Viera became pregnant for the second time, but this pregnancy wouldn't make it to term. And 3 months into her pregnancy, she suffered a miscarriage. Unbeknownst to anyone, her freedom was near. During her deprivation of liberty, Viera was able to obtain a protection number for women in Peru, and in a desperate act to save herself, she threw a piece of paper with a number in it out of the window. However, it was a crucial event that triggered her release. When Viera's miscarriage took place, her blood loss was tremendous, and her captors were forced to take her to hospital. It was Viera's image, bloodied and fainting, that prompted one of her neighbors to denounce the situation she witnessed. The complaint led the prosecutor's office to take all the background information on the case, and a search of the Armas family home was ordered. There, a shocking image of Viera was found, which was far from what her friends and family described. Thin, confused, disoriented. This is how Viera was found at the time of her release. A woman who was described as empowered, well-traveled, independent, looked totally different. Her in-laws tried to stop Viera and her daughter from being taken out of the house, but the warrant had already been served and the police wouldn't leave without them. The following days were filled with contradictions. Giorgio Armas gave multiple testimonies, which rather than clarifying his accusation of kidnapping, made him look even more guilty.
Es una mentira, puede ser, no sé, es que ahí está coludida la vecina le ha estado instigando, diciéndole deja a ese tipo, que me deje, que ella le pasó lo mismo porque tuvo problemas con su esposo, que no se sentía cómoda, salió, o sea, es una locura. Y como les vuelvo a decir, soy un secuestrador libre, porque la fiscalía no tiene pruebas.
Giorgio's theory of innocence collapsed brutally when Rivera's statement to the prosecutor's office was made public. It drew particular attention from public opinion, which has been drawn as the real motive for such aberrations. Both in Viera's statement as well as in the comments the neighbors made to the media, it is clear that the Chilean woman's in-laws cultivated a strange attachment to little Paris, Viera and Giorgio's daughter. Viera's in-laws forced the little girl to call them mom and dad. In Giorgio's show, the girl is even presented without her mother's surname. In this way, they try to appropriate her, and she too was deprived of her liberty.
Mira lo que le hacen a mi hijita.
The way in which this family sought to maintain control over Viera's life was shocking, for they not only kept her completely isolated from her surroundings, but also denied her proper medical care when she suffered the miscarriage. They also didn't allow the 3-year-old to interact with other children, so she barely knew how to speak. Viera had to resist abduction to stay with her daughter, and by throwing a piece of paper out of the window in the hope of being saved, she was finally able to be released from her horrific captivity. Today, however, the situation has taken an unexpected turn. Her husband has sued her for slander after claiming that Viera wants to take her daughter away from him. Viera and her young daughter are now in protective custody and away from her captors, awaiting the judicial process that will determine the culprits and their sentences. With that, they can begin to build a new life with the freedom they should always have had.